Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So, back during the Dungeons & Dragons Adventures in the Forgotten Realms spoiler season, that still has not gotten any easier to say. Anyways, back during that spoiler season, a very interesting and unique card came out with the Deck of Many Things. And actually, I even titled that episode, A New Janky Alternative Win Condition, and it is just that. Well, ever since then, it's kind of been on the back of my mind because the way that it works is very unique, and the way that they made it work is just really hard to pull off. So on this episode, I'm going to be taking you through all the things that you need in order to try to break this card, and believe me, there is a lot to it. I've been working on this, again, for quite some time. It's been on my mind. So let's begin this crazy journey with the Deck of Many Things. So again, for those of you that don't remember all the text on this crazy card, the Deck of Many Things is a legendary artifact that costs 5. It has pay 2, tap, roll a d20, and subtract the number of cards in your hand. If the result is 0 or less, discard your hand. If you rolled a 1 to 9, you return a card at random from your graveyard to your hand. If you roll a 10 to 19, you draw 2 cards. And if you roll a 20, you put a creature card from any graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. When that creature dies, its owner loses the game. So yeah, there is a lot going on here, and yeah, I don't blame you if you didn't remember every single piece of text on this card, because there's a lot. So in order for this alternative win condition to work with the Deck of Many Things, you need a lot of different pieces to work out and need to be set up in the right way. So let's break this down piece by piece. First up with that activation, obviously by paying 2 and tapping it, you roll that d20, but then you subtract the number of cards in your hand. If the result is 0 or less, you lose your hand. Now again, the actual alternative win condition, or should I say alternatively making one player lose condition of this card, is rolling a d20 and hitting a 20 and not subtracting anything. So that means that in order for us to actually hit that 20, and again, we're not guaranteed to hit that by any means, we have to have 0 cards in our hand. So even before activating this, we need to have 0 cards in our hand. So after meeting that requirement of being handless, after we pay 2 mana and tap and activate this, we still have a 1 out of 20 shot of actually getting that 20, which again is what, 5%? Chance to actually get the piece that we want. We are much more likely to either get between 1 and 9 or 10 and 19, and when that happens, we then are either going to return a card at random from our graveyard to our hand or draw 2 cards. Which means, of course, that we're going to be getting at least a card into our hand. As long as we've got a card in our graveyard, we're going to be getting at least 1 or 2 cards in our hand, which we then, if we want to activate this again, we have to get rid of. So results 1 through 19 actually go against helping us when it comes to getting that number 20. But even let's say that we actually hit that 20, we get to pick a creature card from any graveyard and put it onto the battlefield under our control. When that creature dies, its owner loses the game. So first up, obviously, our opponents need to have creatures in their graveyards for us to actually get them into play. Obviously, if an opponent doesn't have a creature in their graveyard, we can't take them out in this method, and even if an opponent does have a creature in their graveyard and we get lucky enough to, again, roll that 20 without a hand, and we get their creature into play, they don't lose the game until that creature dies. So again, that creature has to actually die, not just leave the battlefield, so if they bounce it, if it gets exiled, etc, 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 they don't lose the game. We have to actually have it die. Now, I probably should have mentioned this before. Obviously, the way that this card was made is just intended to be something, completely random and fun, which, is pretty much like the Deck of Many Things. It is incredibly hard to actually make consistently work and actually be able to use and abuse this as an alternative win condition. The way that this card was designed, there's, again, a lot of factors that need to be met and a lot of luck that needs to happen. Again, you have to be handless, you have to hit a 20, an opponent has to have a a creature in their graveyard, then you have to have that creature die. And again, keep in mind that's just to take out one opponent. Now, is it pretty ridiculous to try to pull this off? Absolutely, and is it also ridiculous to, make an entire episode around how you would actually try to pull this off? Yes, probably. Regardless, I think it's fun, so now let's go through and tackle all these different factors and how we're actually going to make this happen. First up again, to actually even activate this and, have the possibility of hitting a 20, without, subtracting anything from our hand, we can't have a hand. So let's utilize something like Scourge Familiar, which is a fantastic discard outlet, which can make sure that we keep our hand size to 0 and benefit us by discarding cards. Now, obviously, you might be thinking, well, you can just cast whatever else is in your hand, and absolutely you can, but what happens if you draw in a bunch of lands? You need to get rid of those. Scourge Familiar is a fantastic way to discard cards freely and actually generate us mana while doing so. And of course, there are other discard outlets out there that I could mention. There are plenty of them out there. This one just a, extremely superb one because it gives us mana when we discard. Regardless, again, keeping our hand completely empty is important whenever we activate this, or we have absolutely no chance of getting to that alternative win condition because we are subtracting from that 20, even if we hit a 20. The next factor actually comes with hitting that 20, and I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point, we only have 2 cards that can actually help us with hitting that 20 with cards like Pixie Guide and Barbarian Class. Pixie Guide says if you would roll 1 or more dice, instead roll that many dice plus 1 and ignore the lowest roll. And of course, Barbarian Class says the exact same thing, and it does other things too, but actually we don't even need to level this one up to get what we want. Essentially, each of these grant us an additional roll, which they don't let us actually pick which dice we want as the result, but they do give us the higher dice. And of course, the more of these effects that we have in play, the better. So if we have both these in play, great, we can basically roll 3 dice and hope that we hit a 20. Which again dramatically increases our percentage chance of doing so. So keep in mind that on top of actually having these cards, if you've got ways to actually copy them, more so likely with Pixie Guide with things like Cackling Counterpart and making token copies of it, you can make your percentage chance of this actually happening much more likely. So again, step 1, have no hand. Step 2, set up ways to make our percentage chance to actually roll a 20 more likely. There's no way to guarantee a 20, but again, the more of these effects that we have in play, the better. Now again, percentage chance is we're not going to be hitting that 20 on the roll, so we obviously need ways to try again. So let's talk about cards like Clever Conjurer, Kelpie Guide, Tidewater Minion, Hero's Follower, and Vizier of Tumbling Sands. Each of these can essentially tap to untap another target permanent, so essentially we can untap our Book of Many Things, and if we've got the mana for it, we try again. After, again, we get rid of the actual card that we either got back from our graveyard, which was returned at random, or the one that we drew into, or should I say 2 that we drew into, depending on what number that we rolled. Again, like I mentioned before, this card, though it is, giving you some card advantage technically by either getting you a card back or having you draw cards, is kind of actively working against itself for its own alternative win condition. That being said, of course, there are certain cards that we can cast and draw into or get back from our graveyard that can really help us out, like, say, Dramatic Reversal. This one's gonna untap all non-land permanents we control, so obviously that includes our Book of Many Things, any mana rocks that we have, and of course, if we also have some of these untap effects in play again, like Clever Conjurer, it untaps those too. So we cast this, we untap all of our things, and we generate even more mana. And actually, I should mention this right here because obviously this is probably going to come up in the comments as well. Yes, this is a combo card that can work incredibly well with Isochron Scepter. And of course, there are a lot easier ways to win if you actually have Dramatic Reversal and Isochron Scepter together, with a couple of mana rocks in play. But that's not this episode. And actually, kind of the ironic thing is, even if you have this combination in play, and you've got, mana rocks in play, so you can just keep untapping your Book of Many Things and trying again and again and again, that's still, not actually a guaranteed win. Because again, if you are trying to win with Book of Many Things, you need ways to get rid of cards in your hand, again, like that Scourge Familiar, because if you keep drawing into lands, you can't, just play those lands. There's just a lot of different factors with the Book of Many Things that makes it pretty funny. Regardless, outside of Dramatic Reversal and Isochron Scepter, you could also utilize cards like, Vitalize or Ready or Join Shields to untap, those creatures if you've got a lot of those creatures out that can help untap your permanents. Vitalize is going to untap all creatures you control, Ready is going to make your creatures indestructible, then untap them, and then Join Shields is going to have you untap all creatures you control and give them Hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So on top of untapping your creatures, there are ways to protect them while they're going to be untapping your book. And again, the Book of Many Things itself can actually kind of help you out in a way by, again, if you roll that 1 to 9 and return a card at random from your graveyard to your hand, if you return one of these, or that Dramatic Reversal, you can untap your things again. That being said, again, that card that is returned is at random, so you might want to include some other things that we're going to go through now. So some other cards that you might want to consider, again, if you're building around this crazy deck, are cards like Bag of Holding and Titan's Nest. Bag of Holding says, whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. So essentially, again, if you've got your Scourge Familiar and you can discard cards that you don't need, this permanently gets rid of them so that they are exiled instead of just in your graveyard. So again, essentially, if you cast your Dramatic Reversal or your Vitalize or whatnot, that can then just be the only card in your graveyard, and you are guaranteed to hit that even if the return is random. An even better card for this potential situation, though, might be Titan's Nest, which says, exile a card from your graveyard, add colorless, spend this mana only to cast a colored spell without X in its mana cost. Basically, you can just freely exile whatever cards you want out of your graveyard. So again, if you discard cards in your graveyard, get rid of those, or if you've already cast other spells this game, get rid of those, etc, etc, etc. You can essentially make it again so that your graveyard only has the exact card that you want to get back, again like that Dramatic Reversal. A different direction, though, that can help out in another way is a card like Penance, or okay, maybe even Hidden Retreat, but that one's a bit more specific, but let's go through Penance first. Penance is a pretty old card, so I'm going to read its Oracle text. It says, put a card from your hand on top of your library. The next time a black or red source of your choice will deal damage this turn, prevent that damage. So I should say that there has to be a legal target for this, whether again that's, something like Scourge Familiar or something your opponents have, or maybe even your commander. You need a legal target for this to actually use it. That being said, if you do have this in play, it can really help you out, again, depending on what you roll. If you roll and draw those two cards, well, you can just put those cards back on top of your library if you want to, so you still have no hand, and then you also didn't add to your graveyard to just fill it even further, to then, not get back the card that you actually want. Hidden Retreat is a bit more specific, and let's read that Oracle text now. It says, put a card from your hand on top of your library, prevent all damage to be dealt by target instant sorcery spell this turn. So again, you do need a legal target for this, so you need actually to have an instant or sorcery that you can actually target. So harder to pull off than Penance, but still doable. Regardless, again, as you can clearly see, in order to break this card, there are a ton of different factors that you have to take into account. Moving on, some ways to potentially help yourself out with this, combination are with cards like Auric Loremage, Violent Tumor, and Mythos of Brokos. Auric Loremage is especially effective. It has tap search your library for a card, put in your graveyard, then shuffle. So again, this can go get something like, that Dramatic Reversal and put it right into your graveyard. And again, if you can get everything else out of your graveyard, you can ensure that you hit this, again, if you get a random card from your graveyard back. And Violent Tumor and Mythos of Brokos can still help you out, but again, those are one-offs. On top of that, of course, you can also utilize cards to actually get the card back again, if you need to keep on tapping and you don't hit that random card. Cards like Regrowth and Treasure Find can help you get that card back to recast again. To say that there's a lot of moving pieces when thinking all this through is kind of an understatement. Because again, you also need to ensure that you have a creature in your opponent's graveyards as well. So perhaps you can mill creatures into their graveyard with things like Codex Shredder or Grind Clock. Codex Shredder has tap target player mills a card, and Grind Clock can essentially do the exact same thing or even more depending on how many charge counters are on it. Obviously, you can also utilize something like Viscera the Dreadful, which can tap to destroy target creature, and again, I just included all these tap effects because, again, with all these untap effects that you're going to be utilizing as well, these can be utilized multiple times to help you hopefully get the effect of having an opponent's creature in their graveyard. Now, it gets slightly even more complex because what if the weird scenario happens, where you are playing against a player that literally has no creatures in their entire library or graveyard or anywhere? Now that scenario is incredibly unlikely, but could occur, I guess, and in that scenario, then you would have to mind slaver that player to take over their turn, get their commander out, sacrifice their commander somehow or get it to go into their graveyard, choose not to put it into the command zone, and then you can go from there. Again, highly unlikely, but just a scenario that I thought I should bring up just in case, because again, there's a lot of different scenarios with this card. On top of all of that then, though, again, that player doesn't even lose the game when you happen to get a 20 with no cards in your hand and you get a creature out of their graveyard into play under your control. That creature, just being in play doesn't matter. You need to be able to get that creature to die. So yeah, have a creature sacrifice out like a Viscera Seer to finish the job. Viscera Seer is a fantastic free sacrifice outlet that says sacrifice a creature, scry 1, and yeah, a free sacrifice outlet is probably needed. Although again, at this point, you probably have ways to generate infinite mana or whatnot. If you're finding ways to actually pull this off and do it consistently, there are some crazy things going on, but still, a free sacrifice outlet is probably a good idea. That being said, some other cards to consider, and thank you, Eddie, for bringing these up, are cards like Lithiform Engine, Tanos Urzo's Apprentice, and Kirkesh Ronaki Ancient, which can help you duplicate the activated ability of your Book of Many Things. But again, please keep in mind with timing, after, the first result occurs, maybe let's say that's, draw 2 cards, you need to make sure that you also discard those cards before the other part of this deck goes. Yeah, this is all pretty complex. That being said, if I was to try the absurd task of building a deck completely around this card and trying to win with this alternative win condition, and just that alternative win condition, I would probably choose Garth One-Eye as the commander for this deck. First up, Garth is a 5-color commander, so he gives you access to every single kind of card that you could potentially need in order to try to make this crazy thing happen. And on top of that, of course, Garth has tap, choose a card name that has been chosen from among Disenchant, Brain Geyser, Terror, Shivan Dragon, Regrowth, and Black Lotus. Create a copy of the chosen card name, you may cast the copy. Garth is kind of like a toolbox commander, can help you out in a lot of circumstances too. And yeah, with this kind of concept having a lot of untap effects, it definitely reminded me of my own Garth deck, so yeah, Garth would be the commander that I would choose for this. Though there are probably plenty of other options out there, but yeah, I would probably lean toward a 5-color commander again because this deck has so many different kinds of pieces that it needs to actually function. And I would say consistently, but it's going to be really hard to actually make this pretty consistent to pull off, I am sure. Regardless, at the end of the day, yeah, the way that this card was designed was very much, it seems like, to be, hey, this random alternative loss condition can sometimes happen, but it's, really difficult to pull off, and you're not supposed to try to build a deck entirely around this. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't, but if you do, remember to take all those things that we discussed today into account. And of course, I am sure that there are plenty of effective things that I missed in combination with this card, so please, please, please let me know in the comments below what those things are and how you would go about pulling this off. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.